Yeah, particularly after the summer we've had, when we have had a
Yeah,
lot of sunshine, it feels even worse.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm. I'm just waiting to see a few more people to join. Oh, that's Max. Day too late. But we are feeling generous. So if you haven't and need until Monday to get your entry in, just let us know today and we'll obviously hold a space open. Um, if you haven't had a chance to look at the entry page on the website and all the details, there's literally a category for everybody. And also, we want to recognise your international marketing campaigns and exceptional members in your team. So it's really worth just taking a bit of time to put your entry in. It's really amazing for raising profile, even if you only make it to the, I say only, even if you make it to the shortlisted stage, and worth cancelling your weekend plans for. So if you haven't done it, do let us know, and we'd be delighted to get your entries.
Yes, it is on. So I'm in a meeting. So
Oh, there we go. Rebecca's muted herself. So yeah, and obviously if you've got any queries about the awards, just let us know, drop one of us a line and I'm sure we can help. Um, since we last met, I think probably the big thing in the calendar has been Anuga. I think some of you are probably out there exhibiting or visiting. Sandra, from a sort of organiser's perspective, good show? Did it work having everybody in the different categories in the halls?
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. We're certainly up to our step count. I don't know about anything else, but we've certainly clocked up a few miles between us, getting between the halls. I've just done a couple of little slides actually. I did them for a DBT event, which was just yesterday. So yeah, just sort of a few facts and figures and some pictures to bring it to life, I guess, for people that don't know Anuga or haven't been out there. I mean, it is vast. When you look at the stats there, it is the biggest trade show in the world. Golf Food do say they are, but they use an odd criteria because Anuga has more exhibitors and more square meters. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how they calculate that one. But I think the interesting thing is how international it is. If you look at those bottom stats, 94% of exhibitors come from outside of Germany, as do 80% of the visitors. So it is truly a global show. And one that the UK does well at. We had about 70 companies across all these different sector halls. So, you can see how Anuga tried to make it a bit easier for the visitor to get around. But it is still a bit of a mammoth assault, if you like. We promote our UK group quite heavily, so we produce a little catalogue which goes out to our buyer group, and we do send it to DBT as well so that they can whiz it out to their contacts, and in that there's a little profile for each company. So we do our best to try and promote what's going on. For those that didn't make it, this is what it looked like. So we use the great branding to flag the UK groups. The stands you see here are in Hall 10.2, which the PS8 team are responsible for all of what you're looking at here. And it's a real mix of brands and companies in different sizes. So if you look on the left, you've got companies like Tracklements, we had Cornish Sea Salt, we had Potts with us. There are some companies who are agencies representing brands. That's Food Export International in the middle there, with Nairns, Knowles, Mr. Filberts and Bella Zoo. And then you've got major companies like Premier Foods who came with us, and they were promoting three of their brands, which was Fuel, Sharwood's and Spice Tailor. In fact, they bought Merchant Gourmet literally just before Anuga. I don't know if you picked up on that. So they were sort of trying to pop that in as well, even though all the graphics and everything had been finalised just before the show. But yeah, they were great in terms of bringing a bit of theatre. We were strong in dairy, where we had, I think, about 12 companies in the dairy hall. And then AHDB took a space as well, for visiting dairy companies to be able to take advantage of. And then those that don't know, PS8 do a lot of stand build as well across the show. So built stands in different locations, a few of them there that you can see, for those that want to go into a product sector hall, but where there isn't enough of a group to justify the branding. The meat section, they do their own thing. Meat is buzzing the whole time. It's really interesting how the world meat buyers do come together at Anuga. And those stands there just sort of show how the different nations exhibit. That's QMS at the bottom, Wales, and then AHDB promoting Britain. We take a little space. These aren't the most exciting photos. These are our sort of operational photos. But FDA members were able to use this as a bit of a hub to meet up. And then on the Tuesday night, we pulled together a British Food and Drink Showcase networking event with which I have to say, hats off to Karen and the team from PSA, turned this around within 4 weeks. We were asked 4 weeks ahead of time to put it together and managed to source all of the product that you're looking at there, courtesy of Seafood Scotland, Invest Northern Ireland, AHDB and Welsh Government. And then the exhibitors was hugely generous with cheese. I think the staff at the venue are going to be eating cheese for the next 2 weeks because we got more than that we needed. But that went really, really well. And we also made sure that the drinks were served were from the UK. So we had Wrexham Lager, we had Night Timber sparkling wine, we had gin from Northern Ireland. So yeah, it was a really, really good event in a very, very nice venue. So that was great to sort of add value. DBT funded that, which was good. So it added real value to what the exhibitors were doing themselves. Yeah, I think that sort of brings it to life. So what I would say for those that think it's too big or think it's not for them, you know, it is a major international trade show. The product sectorization makes it easier for the buyers, and there are solutions for companies of whatever size and scale you're at. So it should really be on the radar for 2 years' time. With CIAL in Paris, the next one on that scale for us, which is October. And the show organisers are pushing hard for contracts. So those of you that are planning to do it and haven't told PSA yet, please do, because we can only book what we had demand for, and we need to get those contracts in quick. Otherwise, there won't be any space available for us to take. So yeah, hopefully that's a quick roundup of everything and brought it to life for you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. How did it work with distributors with the being broken down by category, and also the fact that over the last couple of years distributors have been coming and they've already kind of got their calendars full of specific meetings rather than just cruising the aisles. Did you get many distributors coming to our reception looking for?
Yeah, no, really good point. And I think you're absolutely right. I think people plan exhibitions now in a way that they never used to. I think you used to get a lot more passing trade at these shows. But now you really do have to be very proactive. And it's quite interesting talking to people that took that approach. So, you know, companies like Walker's Nonsuch, Cornish Sea Salt, you know, they've invited all their buyers, they've trawled other lists. You know, there is a networking app that you get for being in Cologne to encourage people to come. And we try and drum that into them in the sort of lead up of the market briefings. So yeah, a little bit of both. And I think that's where the sort of added value and taking advantage of the networking opportunities are so important. I mean, ESMA, I'm sure many of you know the ESMA network, but they have a reception on the Monday evening, which is a real who's who of major players in the international distribution network. And we make sure our team go along to that to schmooze a bit as well. The info stand gets inquiries from people that are, you know, looking for a particular category. We're always a little bit disjointed because obviously distributors with a big list don't particularly come to us. They know what they're doing. So hopefully by the promotion that we've done in advance, they understand who's there from the UK and put some of them on their list. There was a very strong delegation from La Comer in Mexico who spent a lot of time in the UK group. And if you haven't picked up already, they are planning a major British promotion next year. So they're a major player in supermarkets and premium retail. And the DBT team, we're in touch with them to see if we can do a follow-up for people they weren't able to meet either in their visit to the UK, which was the day before Anuga, or at their time at Anuga. But they had a team of 8, I think. They had all their category buyers really blitzing everything. So that's a real good opportunity, which we'll pump out to everybody once we get something in writing from them. Yeah, we met people from India, obviously from Europe, US. Yeah, good international mix.
Yeah, sounds good. Mark, you were nodding nodding there when Sandra was talking about the guys from Mexico. Did you get involved in chatting to them?
Yeah, I had a chat with Adriana and the buyer from Le Comer. I did all my follow up this week actually in terms of looking at that opportunity for next year. So they're keen on real crisps for that promotion. So I've already started the conversations. But yeah, thanks Sandra for letting me use the space to kind of have that meeting.
Good. No, glad that worked.
Gold star for following up immediately as well.
That's always the danger, isn't it? Come back and get busy with other things. So yeah, top marks, Mark.
Anybody else who was at Anuga? Any feedback on how it was for you? I don't know who else was there. I know David was there from Coca-Cola, was walking. I think he was walking the aisles and visiting, but he's obviously not here today. I think they're on their big trip to Asia.
Yeah, Nicola, just for me, the show was really busy. Like you touched on, I kind of came in on the Monday and it was just back-to-back meetings the whole day. On the Tuesday, I got a bit of time to kind of go around and mooch about people and stuff. But I found it was probably one of the most productive shows I've been to for a very long time, just in terms of new leads and also the mix of people there. So I'm looking at a load of new business and kind of all those guys were there. So it was a good chance to have a conversation with them. So yeah, no, it was a really good show for me. Really enjoyed it.
That mainly meetings that you knew that guys were going to be there and meet them.
Yeah. Pre-planned. It's that when everyone's just going to the same location, it's just that efficiency piece. But now a couple of kind of walk bys and other things as well, where I bumped into people and stuff like that. So no, it was really good, really productive.
Good. That's really good to hear. And as Sandra said, yeah, counting down now to CL. So yeah, do get in touch with the team if you're thinking of exhibiting. Good. Thank you. Thanks both. Okay, so Food and Drink Federation have produced their trade snapshot for the first half of 2025, and Max is back with us again to walk us through the numbers. Hi, Max, and welcome. And hopefully you've got a bit more of a smile on your face than you normally have when you come along to these these sessions to chat through the numbers.
Oh, I'm always happy when I'm discussing numbers, Nicola, you know that. Firstly, I apologize. I've given this presentation 5 times this week, so if you've seen it before, just pretend you haven't and just enjoy the show.
With jet lag, so that to add into the mix.
Yeah, it's away for 2 weeks. I got back on Monday and I've been a little bit out of it all week, but hopefully this works because I've had a little bit of issue with my joining this morning with sound and stuff. So let me know if you can see the screen.
Hopeful. Yep.
Okay, I can't see you guys anymore, but I assume you can see mine. So just shout if you have any questions or I'll do it at the end. So yeah, as Nicola pointed out, we published our latest trade snapshot, which looks at the first 6 months of 2025. Our next snapshot will be released in, I believe, in December. So that will do everything up until Q3 of this year. One thing to note before we dive into the numbers is, as you imagine, it has been quite volatile out there for the last half of the year. I would, not blaming anyone specific, but there might be a man from the US which is causing a little bit of disruption around the world. But as you will see, it is opening up very short-term opportunities as well for food and drink exporters. Oh, it's not moving on 1 second. There we go. So in terms of overall exports, as we're seeing the trend continue in non-EU share of exports increasing up over 10% just at the first half of this year. This is mostly driven by the US, China, and a few other markets such as the UAE and Canada, as well as Turkey. You'll see Turkey's up almost 70%, and we do a deep dive on that later in the report. And I have a start on it a little bit later. We have obviously a lot of those countries in our top 20 markets, which are growing quite well. We are also under negotiations for either new or updated FTAs. So, for example, India entered our top 20 market for the first time ever this year, growing over 11%. And as you are aware, there's been a new trade agreement signed with India. So they, over the next 5 to 10 years, as those tariffs come down, we could potentially see a further increase in that one. We've got the UAE up over 7% as well. The UAE is quite interesting. We've got the negotiations at the moment with the Gulf Cooperation Council. The latest intel seems to suggest that we could see an agreement signed, or at least an agreement in principle, sorry, by the end of the year. Canada, I'll just mention as well. I'll dive into Canada a little bit later around the kind of US tariff stuff, but we are seeing good growth to the Canadian market. We now have access, or will soon have access to Canada under the CPTPP agreement. They're ratifying, or they've said they would ratify the UK's accession this fall. So hopefully we'll have a slightly more access to that market, particularly in the dairy sector. The report also looks at the Australian and New Zealand markets over the last 2 years since the agreement's been signed. I know it says there that Australia is down 0.9% this half, but actually overall since the agreement is signed, it is up, and specific categories such as ice cream and biscuits are doing really well as well. And New Zealand is up over a quarter since the agreement was signed. We also look at volumes just to take the inflationary part out of it. As you are very aware, there's been high inflation over the last few years. So you can still see that we are below where we were 2 years ago, but we are up from 2024. So, and if we look at since 2021, since the UK left the EU, we are quite far behind where we should be as well. We have a page dedicated to imports. So you can see that imports has been pretty much increasing year on year since 2020. It's been quite healthy growth. Even during COVID, it was very stable. You'll see that the non-EU share as well is up massively. This is in part because of the implementation of the border target operating model, which puts EU and non-EU imports at the same kind of level of certification and requirements. But as the opportunity of the SPS agreement potentially comes in a couple of years, one thing to note is that will impact the imports that were coming from non-EU countries. Now it puts us back to where we were when we were in the EU. So although very positive and making it easier for EU imports and exports, it might disrupt the non-EU imports. There's been a massive increase in the imports of countries that are very close to the US for obvious reasons. So you'll see that China imports have increased 17%. Canada's also increased almost 40%. And there's an obvious reason why, with all the US is not seen as a stable partner for some reason. Not sure why. Going forward. But with retaliatory tariffs and US tariffs, markets are looking away from the US, it seems, in the first 6 months of the year. So I deep dive a little bit now into the US tariffs issue and how that's kind of disrupted global trade. First thing to note is, I'll just get that out of your way there. Exports to the US have increased quite a lot. So they've gone up almost 19% in the first 6 months of the year. Initially, we thought this was stockpiling before the US tariffs came into force. So January, February, and March, we saw quite a large, sizable increase in exports to the US. However, what we have seen is this has been pushed over. So we're also seeing an increase in the months past March. So April, June, July have also seen these huge increases in exports of food and drink products to the US. And this is across the board. It's not just in one or two categories. It's not just in alcohol or whiskey. It's across the board. Sugar, confectionery, biscuits, chocolate, all these ice cream, all these products are doing really well into the US market. Obviously, the UK did have the lowest, equal lowest tariff rate set on them at 10%. And given that we were the first country to come into a prosperity agreement with the US, it did give companies a little bit of stability. Well, stability as far as you can in this situation. But it did mean that the US was kind of looking at UK rather than places like China, which obviously has been back and forth with a trade war, and other places like Canada and Mexico when they're putting their retaliatory tariffs on. So the UK did benefit off this as well. One thing we do bring out in the report, and one thing that the FTF are pushing for when it comes to any further negotiation when it comes to the US, is now the EU has come to their agreement as well with the US. There is some differences in the tariff rates between the UK and the EU, some more preferable for the UK and some less preferable. So you can see in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, I've put a couple of products there and kind of compared what the tariffs are between the UK and EU. So one thing what we're pushing for is we're pushing for at least equal access or equal market access as the EU for those products where we're seeing a higher tariff. So for example, chocolate 20 up to 20% for the UK, 15% for the EU, ice cream 30% to 20%. So we're looking at least pushing it down to at least EU rates. However, we don't want to lose the preferential rates that we get on certain products, looking at things like coffee, sweet biscuits, tea, where we get a better rate. In terms of what is happening elsewhere in the world with these tariffs, we're seeing some quite high export opportunities to certain markets, particularly those which had strong trade with the US and has been hit hardest by those tariffs. So you'll see in the first half of the year, there was notable declines in in imports from the US from countries of Canada, Mexico, and China, where it looks like we're filling in that gap. So, for example, almost a 9% decrease in imports into Canada from the US, and that's led to a 15% increase in UK exports to Canada. Although these markets, such as Canada, has come to certain agreements, I'm not sure the Canadians are trusting of the Americans right now. So we could capitalize on this and try and fill the gap that was left by the US. Oh. Is it going to move on? There we go. We also do a little deep dive into Turkey. So the second round of negotiations between the UK and Turkey for updating the trade agreement actually finished this week. So quite a topical market. It's also had a huge increase in food and drink trade, so up 69% in the first 6 months of the year, which is incredibly large, especially for a market that's already from that high baseline as well. So one thing with Turkey is, although it's got this huge export potential, we're also looking at it as a kind of as an agricultural powerhouse. We're looking to diversify our supply chain. So products that were historically protected under the EU agreement, things like olive oil, certain nuts and fruit, protected because of places like Italy and Greece. We're no longer needing that protection on the UK industries. So we're looking at potentially removing olive oil tariffs with Turkey, and same with kind of dried fruit and nuts. So it gives us a good opportunity to diversify our supply chain potentially away from the EU as well. You'll see on the bottom left that we're already getting a lot. So we're already seeing quite high tariffs, but also tariff rate quotas on a couple of products. So I've name checked a couple there where we actually go above the quota and we're having to pay these high tariffs. We're also seeing some very strange import procedures which are looking at extra costs. So things like agricultural levies, financial, I can't remember all the names, but they have all these names for different fees they can put on to our products, even when they're getting preferential rates. Currently, it's one of the largest blockers at the moment with the negotiations, these extra charges, so agricultural levy, financial responsibility, surveillance, anything where you have to get a stamp from a consulate, it will cost money. If you have any experience of these extra charges away from tariffs, we'd be very grateful if you could share them so we could share those case studies with DBT. They're currently trying to get a list of companies which are experiencing this, because Turkey and the negotiations are pretty much saying it's not happening, but our evidence from our members and our businesses are saying it is happening. So we just need to kind of get a list of companies together where we can show that it is happening at the border. You can see that we've had a large increase into the exports, Turkey specifically in the alcoholic sector, but also I'm not sure why we're the largest supplier to Turkey of eggs, which I think is quite a strange thing, but I love bringing it up. But it's increasing year on year, so I can't say it's an anomaly anymore. But yeah, so quite good growth there, and overall, I think the picture of the snapshot is generally quite positive, even with this kind of turmoil that's gone over the last 6 months. We're seeing very high growth in some markets, very low growth in others. It's not very stable at the moment, but overall, we seem to be navigating through it quite well. Um, are there any questions? I'll share the link to the report in the chat if I can. I'll figure out how to do it after I unshare my screen and I can see you guys again. But if there's any questions, please shout or feel free to email myself or Nicola afterwards.
Cheers, Max. Just a bit of an observation from me. I've got a live example of Turkey and trying to get stuff cleared. I've got like 2 or 3 pages of hoops to jump through that I've had back from the authorities there, to the point where I've actually just give up. I've told the distributor to stand down. I had the same issue when I was at Britvic before. It took me a year, but I eventually, and funnily enough, I just got the photos about 2 weeks ago of Britvic mixers in Turkey in Carrefour, which is a job I started about 18 months ago, my old role. But yeah, if you share your email address, I'll show you that live example of where it's just they're asking for some crazy things, and it's reminds me of Spain when they were asking for like scientific terms and names in Latin and stuff like that. Just prohibitive.
Thanks, Mark. Can I ask which company you're from? Sorry.
So sorry, I'm from Tato Group. So, and we have I think there's a 49% potato tax for Turkey, which doesn't put us in a competitive position when we land on retails.
Yeah, the other thing which is interesting about the Turkish border is they like testing everything, even if it's a low risk product. So when we bring things into the UK, we pretty much test a couple things around meat and dairy, whereas Turkey will test every consignment, and no matter what it is, obviously a large cost to the exporter as well. And then they have all these strange and wonderful fees and taxes on top of the tariff rate. So
Yeah.
yeah, be keen to understand that a little bit more from your point of view, and I can put that forward to DBT. Like I said, they're creating like a little Bible or not Bible, a list of companies and
Yeah.
some of the issues. So they're going into the third round of
Sure.
negotiations, I believe, at the end of the autumn. So if we can get a kind of list together of where we're seeing issues at the border, we can push that forward to DBT.
Awesome. I'll send it over.
Right, anyone else got anything to ask Max, or any comments from your category point of view or country point of view? You mentioned, Max, about obviously a bit of an update on some of the FTAs. Is there anything outside of what you said around GCC, Turkey, obviously, any other FTA updates? It all seems to move so quickly, week by week. The progress
Yeah,
varied.
yeah. I think a great example of that is the India deal that was signed, I think, or concluded and signed. Uh, you had not only a new government coming into power that wanted to show that they're serious about all this stuff, but you also had the US tariffs kind of spurring on the Indians as well. So the Indians came to the table. We've got some outstanding negotiations with South Korea at the moment. That's looking like it could potentially finish quite soon. There's quite low tariffs anyway for food and drink products going into Korea, or if they were, we're on a staging rate. But the rules of origin were quite strict there, so I think they're a little bit more liberal in this in potentially when it's agreed. We've got potentially something with Canada, the renegotiation in Canada coming up. That's very unofficial. That's more my theory. We're hearing a little bit more from DBT around our thoughts on Canada. Nothing official has been released, but seeing as they've been hit by the US tariffs, that could be something coming our way. Mexico was paused 2 years, a year and a half ago. Potentially that could come up soon again with the US tariffs. That wasn't paused by any issues between us. It was done on resourcing from the Mexican side. Trying to think, as you're probably aware, Israel was paused last year as well due to kind of well, obvious reasons. And Switzerland is kind of it's going, but it's quite slow progress. So I believe they're going into their 9th round in January. So not much going on there at the moment. It's already quite a good agreement, so any update would be quite insignificant. And I believe those are all the current ones. I could be wrong. We have the CPTPP, obviously, that went into force in December. I should mention that there's a couple things going on with DBT in Malaysia, and I will be getting updates on that. Well, I should have been getting updates on that today, so I can share with you anything. I'll share with Nicola or Sandra, who can spread the details. I believe that's all the FDAs currently. I could have been missing a few, but those are the main ones.
We're not going to call you out. Thanks. I think, Matthew, you got wanted to ask Max something?
I think you're on mute.
I don't think I can unmute you from. We can unmute you from here, Matt.
I'm busily talking to myself. Apologies, everyone. Yeah, so Max, hello. I'm Matt from Life Health Foods. You might know us for Lizzie's granola, but breakfast cereals in general. My question was more about the latest status of the EU negotiation, insofar as the political agreement was signed, but we were waiting on the activation of that in terms of the mutual recognition of food standards and so on. Is any update on that from anywhere or anyone?
So I might have to come back to you on that. EU isn't my area.
Yeah.
However, I believe the current estimates are mid-2027 coming into force. But please don't quote me on that. I can come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, the
on
wider
that.
question, some of the operational stuff around tracers, which is relating to getting organic products into the EU. And everyone, or at least we are expecting there to be a simplification of that process, for instance.
Yeah, can I jump in there? I had my hand up to ask a similar question. I think I read I read that the EU has agreed to open the discussions on the SPS side of things. And what I read said they were due to commence in October, but DBT, I was on a call with the DB team stakeholders this week, and they didn't have that detail. So I'm not sure if this is completely true. But the report said that they felt that they should reach an agreement within 12 to 18 months, with implementation expected, as Max said, in 2027. So I have asked DBT to confirm that in terms of timings so that we can share that, because we're very conscious that impacts on the future for so many people.
Okay,
So that is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matthew.
Apologies, Max. Only to pick up on the point there, Sandra. I had October in mind in terms of an operational agreement, but obviously the timeline is far longer than that. Then it's 27.
Yeah, I think from what we understand, they haven't actually started talking, so it's going to be a while off yet, unfortunately.
Great.
So
Okay.
the agreement that you're referring to, it's very political. It was an agreement to start negotiations. It wasn't an agreement that's finished. It was an agreement that we were going to prioritize and promise to discuss this at a later date, and it hasn't actually. I don't believe it started yet. I can double check, but yeah, 2027 looks to be, well, they're always a bit late, so maybe a little bit later, but mid 2027 is what government and DBT are saying for implementation of an SPS agreement.
Right, okay, that's clear for now. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Max. And just finally, from me, one of the kind of outcomes of the snapshot is obviously the FDEA calling on the government to sort of build on these positive indicators and do more to support companies with exports. For you, what would those priorities be? What are there any specific things that you're asking for more support with?
From businesses or from the government, sorry.
From government.
So our main messaging here, I mean, the snapshot is usually quite FTA focused, and so we're looking mostly through the FTAs. For us, the largest kind of feedback ones and what we're pushing in for is clarity on some of the Turkey stuff. So I mentioned earlier, some of the customs and border procedures, clarification of what the UK actually knows from that. They're a little bit confused, so we're trying to feed into that. We're asking for some more support in terms of export and import guides. So you would have seen that the trade strategy that was released a few months ago look at kind of capitalizing on some of these FTAs and agreements, and we're pushing government to try and make a lot better, a lot clearer guidance for businesses, a kind of step-by-step guide of how you trade with other nations, import, export, use these FTAs, for example. In terms of the US, we have got a position paper online actually, looking at all the issues that businesses or our businesses have been facing and looking at what we can do to help. One thing I should mention actually in the US before I forget is government have asked us to put together some case studies and also offer their services when it comes to rules of origin. I'm not sure if any of you guys have had issues exporting into the US, given the different tariff rates of different countries now, rules of origin, they're non-preferential. Rules are quite complicated. It doesn't look at this point that any future negotiations will look at changing the rules of origin, product specific rules. So I guess it's an open offer that we can link you up to government that can talk through if your product would be of UK origin going into the US, if that makes any sense at all. For example, I'll give an example to make it easier. We have a few tea companies which are struggling to get their product into the US under UK tariffs because they're getting some of their ingredients from, well, you obviously can't grow tea, very limited tea growing in the UK. They're getting their tea from China, India, Kenya, and when they're exporting it into the US, it's coming under Chinese origin. Chinese tariffs are obviously a lot higher at the moment than UK tariffs, so then having to pay the Chinese tariff on top. It's a little bit confusing. But if you need any assistance or help, DEFRA, I should say, and DBT have offered to sit down with businesses one-on-one to help you through that. I know I started on one question, Nicola, and kind of moved on to it. I just needed to get that in there, just that government are offering support on that as well.
Yeah, okay. I'm thinking there's quite a few different aspects to what you've covered that it might be worth us just doing a little summary. We can send that out to members, and particularly the points where you said you're looking for kind of examples, case studies, etc. We can circulate that to members and feed back to you in going forward. So really useful update. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There's all the messaging and stuff is all on the report as well. So all that stuff that we're asking from government is on the report. I'll put a link in the chat after I figure out how to unshare my screen.
I don't think we can kick you out. I think you could.
Yeah, I think we can. I think I can do that. I can kick you out, Max. Don't take it personally.
Thank you very much. It was really useful as always. And sorry you had to repeat yourself for the 5th time this week, but hopefully that's the last time. So thank you. And yeah, obviously one of the markets that Max mentioned where an FTA has been in place for a couple of years now is Australia. And it's been a long time since we've caught up with our in-market partner, Prof Consulting, and Mark to see what's going on down under. So we're going to rectify that this morning as well by having Mark along to share his insights and observations of what's going on in Australia currently. So hi, Mark, welcome.
Fabulous. Thanks, Nicola. Good morning, everyone. What a great presentation, Max. Looking forward to following that one. Let me just share the screen. Hold on, Nicola, that's not looking good. One second. Nicola, you might have to help me. That's definitely not looking good at this end, yeah?
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
I think it's the fact that we're doing Zoom as opposed to Teams. I think that's what's thrown me, but let's see.
If you hover down the bottom of your screen, Mark, share should pop up, a little green arrow.
Yeah, it was looking very messy, but let's try again. Sorry, apologies, everyone.
That's right. Mark, while Mark's doing that, Max, we did have somebody asking exactly what you just said at your last point whilst we were at Anuga, who've got a gift pack, which is tea that comes in. I think theirs comes from India. They had biscuits, which are UK, and they were totally confused as to what kind of tariffs and things they were supposed to export it under. So we did actually put them onto TariffTel, one of our members, to talk it through and see if they could come up with something. But yeah, if you can share the DEFRA contact, that would be quite good. I can pass that on as well.
Yeah, will do. I think the non-preferential rules of origin is very confusing, and I think there was a lot of confusion around if blending and things like that, blending of the tea, would count for UK origin. But in this case, we got clarity that it didn't. But it seems to be a case-by-case basis and kind of up to the port authority or the port that it goes into. So obviously not fantastic, but yeah, happy to share that contact.
Thank you.
Okay, Nicola, I've got yours, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, have you got it?
Yeah. If we could jump straight into slide 3, then we can push on, yeah.
Okay, hang on a sec. Can everybody see that? Can you see any slides? Can you still see that?
I can see half the screen.
Yeah, that's what I've got at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, only half.
Hang on. Is that better?
Yeah, that's it.
Got it?
Do start slideshow from beginning. Yeah.
You want to go straight to 3?
Yeah, we can jump straight into 3. We just got the front and end there for colleagues that are not on the call, that when we share it, to give them the details. So as Nicola said, it's been a while since we've had an opportunity to present to you. It's hard to think that the year's gone as quickly as it has, but there's a lot happened in the Australian market. So first of all, let's frame the size of the opportunity. If we look across the grocery retail market there, as recorded by people such as Statista, which is a well-respected market size, 145 billion. So a significant market when we think of a population that's still less than 27 million. That said, we shouldn't forget the challenges that the landmass brings. As I said before, 2.5 times the size of Europe, which does bring some real challenges you've got to consider as you look at the market. But a significant market by no means at all. So the narrative has really changed this year in the Australian market, where we've talked about the big two being Coles and Woolworths and 65-66% of that total market. The dynamics locally have changed now. Costco have become bigger. Aldi have become bigger. Aldi are now actually operating across each of the states in Australia and have just opened their 600th store. So for a business that was recognised as being on the eastern seaboard, a bit of a pain into Coles and Woolworths, and now a significant operator in that market and continue to influence price. So as you look in at the Australian market, I would encourage you to think about who do you want to supply, what's your customer journey, and who you should target. Whereas probably 12 or 18 months ago, the immediate response would have been, I need to pitch to Coles, I'd need to pitch to Woolworths. Via the growth in Costco now, they've just opened their 26th store, and as I'm sure you're aware, they've got at least one store now in New Zealand that's operating. There are some other opportunities for you, and it's always that conversation around how do you introduce a brand into that market for those of you that are not in the market currently, because you only get one chance to introduce a brand, and going into somebody like Costco can give you a number of advantages, the same way as going into somebody like Aldi, particularly through their special buy. We're seeing more clients target that now as an opportunity to test the market, build customer trust with the products before you go for a mainstream listing. That said, we should also not forget the independent sector in Australia is nearly 18%. It does come with complexities of supply because of the wholesale model that's holding that sector together, but they're showing good growth also. So I'd encourage you to think, I want to be in Australia. Let me really understand the market before I decide I'm going to rush in and present to Coles or I'm going to rush in and present to Woolworths. Let's understand the best opportunity, where you can target your customers, and where ultimately you can achieve the best value for your brand entering that market. What we are seeing is also we're continuing to see double-digit growth in online. So as I'm sure you remember, Coles and Woolworths have both invested heavily in their infrastructure for online. Aldi have now, as recently as 2 weeks ago, now delivered online shopping experiences for customers across Australia. So that's not something we're seeing in other international markets at the moment. That's something that's special to the Australian market. So I think as you look at the opportunity through online, Aldi's presence in that market is really interesting. And as I think I talked about in one of our more recent calls, Costco have also, through their relationship with DoorDash, made online shopping available to clients that want to shop at Costco. The key difference with the Costco model, without getting too detailed, is you don't need to be a member to be able to access Costco through the online platform. So really, the dynamics in the market are changing, where people are really looking to target growth, and I think that's very exciting for food and drink businesses looking in at that market. From a private label perspective, we continue to see that premiumization of own brand. Double-digit growth across, from Coles's latest trading report that we shared, a majority of their private label growth, a $14 billion brand now, is coming through the growth of their finest products, the same as we're seeing in other international markets. So for those of you that are looking at contract manufacturing or supply opportunities, I believe that premiumization really does start to open up that door even more, because you compete on products that are great tasting as opposed to a value proposition that might be produced closer to the source. Some of the categories that are growing very strongly in the market, low alcohol continues to be a high growth in that space. Anything that's health related in particularly with a protein call out, is really winning in the market. And we're beginning to see that protein plus fiber coming into the market as well. Snacking continues to be a high growth area, particularly where the retailers are shopping for alternatives to chocolate-based products because of the price of chocolate that they're experiencing across their supply base. So that healthier snacking options is also driving opportunities. Convenience continues to be strong, convenience across chilled, but also convenience across frozen. And in the ambient aisle, the same as we're seeing in other markets now, where you look at almost that ambient microwavable rice, where that's becoming a meal solution for those people that continue to work from home. We're seeing growth in the Australian markets around products of that nature. And we're also seeing the growth in world foods. And there was a great example when I was out there recently, where one of the leading brands, which is probably not fair to name on the call, had done a great job of getting their product listed in the international aisle with Woolworths. And then when I walked into the mainstream aisle, they had the same product listed in the mainstream aisle. So there's two different types of shoppers that are shopping that category now. Looking in the traditional condiments aisle and looking in the international aisle, I'd really encourage you to think, as you approach that market, where should I be within that store? Because it means you've got to engage a different buyer. So it's really showing that value of understanding not just a retailer's strategy, but also understanding it at a category level, because there's more than one category that can offer you great success. And then GLP-1, actually just done an interview this week on GLP-1 and how that's changing the way which food and drink businesses are innovating. Just over 2 million people in the UK are now seen to be taking that drug. The number's far higher in Australia. It's far easier to get access to it. So we're beginning to see food coming into that space now that says, how do we appeal for the consumers that are on that weight loss program? How do we recognize the 3 stages of the weight loss program and how their needs differ? But also, what does that mean as people start to exit that program? So I think, whilst Australia and the UK are significantly behind the US in this thinking, I think in this particular category, in this particular approach, I think Australia is slightly ahead of the UK. But I would really encourage you to think about, does your brand or product fit into that need that's growing? Because that gives you a different USP as you start to engage the Australian retailers. And Nicola, if we can move on, please. Sorry, I can't see anyone else. If there's any questions, please shout, or we can take questions at the end, yeah? So, as we look at the outlook moving ahead, I think there's two key differences in the market between Coles and Woolworths at the moment. I think Coles are recognised as having momentum, and in retail, momentum is a significant part of what we need. Woolworths are struggling a bit at the moment, definitely still the largest retailer in the market, but things aren't quite firing for them the way they were 3 or 4 years ago. So as you look into that market, there's a real difference and a different narrative around, do I go to Coles because they've got momentum, or do I go to Woolworths because Woolworths are looking to do something that's going to give them a change or transformation? Two very different discussions and two very different reasons to approach either of those retailers now. So I'd encourage you to think about that, because I think there's a biggest difference in the strategy between the two retailers than we've seen in probably the last 5 or even 10 years. A lot of conversation recently, led by the government in Australia, about inviting a new player into the market. Lulu is the one that's been named in the press. I don't think it's very likely to happen, but the Prime Minister has been over in the Middle East recently, and again, it's a very big story. So I think, just for awareness, they continue to talk about how do they change the dynamics within the Australian retailer, which ultimately puts the Australian retailers on guard, and I think gets them really focused on how do they grow their business, how are they seen to do the right thing. Range rationalisation, both retailers have talked about that openly and how they're looking to reduce the range. Many people look at that and go, gosh, this is really strange. It's a key part of retail. Asda are doing it in the UK at the moment. It's a key part of retail when you go through the cycle. I think in the short term, what it means for suppliers looking in is, if your products aren't, well, firstly, make sure your products are performing and you know how they're performing, whilst you've got a chance to adapt the process and really focus on driving sales if it's not hitting the numbers that you or your retailers think. But secondly, once we go through that range rationalisation programme, what it creates is a space on shelf for innovation. So actually, it could be a really good time now for those of you that got something different to be looking at categories, thinking, once the retailers have gone through this next range of range reviews and taken away products that aren't necessarily hitting their numbers with consumers, then they'll be looking for innovation to fill that gap. So I think the timing can be really great. And global competition, I think, Max has just talked about some of the performance there across the food and drink sector, as we've just heard. And I think people are looking in at the Australian market far more than they have over recent years at an international level and saying, how do we bring our food and drink businesses into that market and take our share of the opportunity? The most recent trade show in Australia was 6 weeks ago. We know the Canadians were over there. We know Borbia have been over there. We know the Belgians are looking at it. Other countries are looking in at the market now, saying what's the opportunity for our agri-food businesses. So if you're thinking about it, I think now's absolutely the right time to get in and look at the market and understand the options, rather than letting it slip down the pad and say it's going to be a 2027 project, because it's getting increasingly competitive. Nicola, if we can move on, please. So how do you win? I think absolutely the market's becoming more challenging, more dynamic, and the opportunities are being chased by more businesses and more countries. I think the time has never been more important to understand the market, but also to move at pace. In a market that's becoming more dynamic and more challenging, I think in understanding what your brands truly stand for, what's your unique selling point, and be able to deliver that with clarity is critical to succeed in the market. I think also understanding the supply chain structure, because there's multiple ways to deliver products into the Australian market, as we've talked about. But as the retailers' margins expectations increase, and we're definitely sensing that at the moment. I had a client come to me the other day, I won't name the category, but he came to me and said, I've just presented to one of the retailers and failed. The retailer said, great products, but if you can't hit 50% margin, then I can't list it. So, to be really competitive in that market, you've got to understand your supply structure and your cost of supplying that, and making sure you're optimizing that to give yourself the best opportunity. Without a doubt, the Australian market has been really competitive over the last 24 months, driven by a number of factors that we probably don't need to go into today. But what it has meant is we've seen less local success stories, less new businesses coming forward. And I think that creates an opportunity for proven businesses overseas that are supplying other retailers, have got access to turnkey innovation, have got brands that are well established already, to fill some of that gap in the Australian market, while the Australian businesses are a little bit bruised and thinking, what do they do next? And the last thing there is really understanding the range review calendar, because if you all go and look at Australia today, success will be determined by the retailer's range review calendar and where you stood in that process. So if you start the journey today, you might not get a product on the shelf for the next 18 months based on the time frames that retailers are introducing new products in that category. So I think if I summarize it, I think putting off tomorrow what you can do today would be a real mistake if you're looking at the Australian market for a number of reasons. But hopefully that's given you a good insight. Anyone else, anyone got any particular questions? Always happy to take them online or offline afterwards. Thanks, Nicola.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think, as you say, it feels as though Australia's been kind of, jogging along pretty the same for a number of years. But what you've just said there is, it's all shaking up quite significantly. And as you said, I think that opens up, lots of opportunities that perhaps weren't there before, or it makes Australia a more attractive market than it has been in recent years. It sounds as though there's a lot of dynamism at all levels going on within the market. So yeah, I mean, obviously, if anyone's got any particular questions for Mark, but do ask them. And obviously, Mark, you're always very open to chatting to people one-on-one to understand the opportunities in those categories in a bit more detail.
Yeah, of course, Nicola. Of course, thank you. Yeah.
Great. Have you noticed? Oh, Matt's got a question. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Nicola. Only to offer help, to be honest. Mark, it was really interesting to read that, but unfortunately, our business is owned by Sanitarium in Australia. So this market isn't open to me, but I have experience of Australia in the past, talking into your supply chain understanding, where I found it was useful to have a different distributor for the independent channel who also looked after the international fixture, and then a different distributor for the mainstream ranging, because they have different skill sets. So if anyone's interested, I've got some contacts, but unfortunately I can't do it myself.
That's really helpful, Matt. Thank you.
Welcome.
So sorts of little tips like that are always very useful for the people if they're looking at the market and want to talk to distributors. So thanks. So nothing else on Australia. So yeah, well, we're coming up. That's hour's gone very quickly. Coming up to the end of our hour together. Sandra, anything else that you want to talk about in terms of shows, activities, anything we've missed?
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Yeah, shows, I mean, everything is live now right through to October 2026. So yeah, if you're not in touch with Karen or Rachel, now's the time to push. A little bit of space left at ISM in Cologne. FoodX in Japan is live. FHC Shanghai is the next show we're going to, which is all done and dusted. And then we're also recruiting for Tuto Food, private label show, FHA Singapore, and the US shows. So yeah, just reach out. I won't run through them all, conscious of time. Is an event by one of our members, the China Britain Business Council. So Antoinetta Becker, many of you know, she'll be hosting a China consumer event, which is on the 24th of November in London. And it's very much looking about the nuances and that are shaping demand in China. And I think she's got a couple of food companies as part of it. It's one of those events where they'll be sharing insights, having a bit of networking, and you can book that via the events tab on the FDEA member site. So yeah, if China's something you're looking to build insights into, that's a good event to flag. Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, and just one other two other to flag. One is 4th of November, White and Black, another one of our professional associates, are going to be running a session on agency and distributor agreements and what are the differences, structures, pitfalls, etc. So well worth tuning into that just to refresh yourself on so that it doesn't all fall over if there's a problem. And also Network Forum on the 4th of December and the awards. If you haven't booked your tickets, in addition to doing your entries this weekend for the actual awards, make sure that you book your tickets. It's an ideal event to bring maybe some of the team along. If you are export service providers and professional associates, to bring some of your clients along to see what we do and look into the world of UK food and drink exporters. So yeah, those were the two things from me. I think that's covers everything. And is there anything else that anyone else wanted to raise before we sign off? Any questions, any burning issues, any comments? Okay. Looks not. So anyway, well, thanks very much for coming along, and we're back here on Friday the 7th of November. So we'll look forward to seeing you all then, and have a good weekend, everyone.